I'm wearing my shirt again. It's like my volunteer shirt. I need to get a network shirt or my phone is shaking so bad. That's not going to be good. That's going to make you so dizzy. This is not. What happened to my little thing? Okay. I don't know what to say about it. I think it's just going to be shaky. Because that's not going to get viral. It's not going to go viral, right? It's such a bad production. That's okay. We're not looking for that. So I sent you a text and I wanted to, oh gosh, I wonder what I could do to make that not so shaky. Hold on, I'm going to try to put my water bottle in here. Oh yeah, look at that. That's way less shaky, don't you think? Let me put my phone down. There we go. And I'm driving. Hopefully no one ever sees these because it's probably not a good idea. Anyway, I say that every time. So I'm interested to see what you think about this because sometimes, I want to use these things with people I do direction with, spiritual direction, right? Or, you know what I mean. So I'm curious to follow a concept through, like to sort of its process to see if it makes sense and if it's helpful. So this seems like it's pretty obvious, and I mean there could be two approaches. The approach that I heard it from was Christian. So it's on this podcast that I listen to, John Eldridge. He's amazing. And they were talking about, like, what is your theology of suffering? So it's one thing that I've written about, and it's something that I think that's really important, is knowing your theology of suffering, whether it's religious or non-religious. And I think especially more if it's non-religious, because then suffering can become very confusing and lonely if you don't, kind of have an understanding of why people suffer and kind of what it means and who you can unite that suffering to. So anyway, I mean, my theology of suffering is obviously Christian, so I won't get into that. But I think it's a really good idea because even, everyone has probably worked that out, right? For whatever reason, their theology of suffering, like people suffer, and if it's like that's life, that's the way life is. But you know what I mean, like it also like brings us together. I said to one of my friends the other day, like, unfortunately suffering is kind of like is just this common thread that unites us, as are any emotions, as is joy. But I mean, everyone endures some type of suffering. So if we can use that to grow, and that's how I see my ministry, right? Like that suffering, it's not only, anyway, in suffering, when we partner and walk with one another, we can grow and live into other people's stories. And like, that's like the good stuff, like that's where, to me, that's where God is. Not only in the suffering, but it does play a pretty big role in it for the people that I work with. And then it's not always, talking about the weather or whatever, and the joys too. I think that's where God is in the joys, also in sharing that and sharing success with your friends and when they're doing amazing, and, God is there too. So anyway, that was the theology of suffering. But so this podcast is about suffering, but it's also about agreements. So like in this form, what agreements do we make with God about our lives and around our suffering. So this guy was telling me the story of his suffering, and they talk about generally in religious views, like, oh, we cried out, like the Israelites or whatever, and then like God wasn't there. So a lot of times in suffering for Christians, when they cry out and like nothing happens, or you're still suffering, or you don't hear the voice of God, or you don't have any comfort, like then you have this whole, right, like kind of existential crisis or internal crisis of, non-belief, of being abandoned, of questioning your faith and all that stuff. So that's the one way to look at it. But then I started to think about agreements, and they were saying like all the agreements that we make around our suffering and around just really negative thoughts. Like I see it in two ways. Like it can be seen through this Christian lens, but also can be seen through this pretty like cognitive behavioral, a little bit of the DBT type of a lens, in that we all have thoughts. I mean, you can see in a Buddhist lens, right? Like we all have thoughts, and like, what are we going to do with those? Like, are we going to take them to our higher power, or are we just going to detach from them? Are we going to break them down? And so then once I went home, and they were like, okay, write down your agreements. So I wrote down a bunch of mine, and one of them that I decided to work through. So like I said, like all the things that we think, like I'm a loser, or maybe I'm like God's not there for me, or is there a God,